Good evening. Welcome to our service tonight. And this is a special set of Holy Week services. We're doing things just a little differently this week. So many of you were disappointed that we don't have the School of the Cross. So what we've done is we've edited it down from 9 hours down to a little over 5 hours, I guess. And we're going to play a portion of it every night, but I do want to come to you live every night. It's important that we walk this journey together. I'm not taping shows in advance, so that would be much easier to do. I want you to know that with Sister Bev and I, we walk this journey with you, just like we've walked every step of our journey together over 40 years. We're not hirelings. We don't run away. We're shepherds. We hang out with the flock. Psalms chapter 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High, who is my refuge, no evil, I love this, no evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him, because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Stand with me, please, now, and let's have a time of worship.
Jesus, we thank you for everything. Oh, the blood, crimson love, Christ of life's demands. Shameful sin Yes, the blood is my victory. What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can make me whole again? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Oh, the blood of the Lamb. Oh, the blood of the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb. The precious blood of the Lamb. What a sacrifice that saved my life. Yes, the blood is my victory.
Please allow me to talk to you about a couple of very practical things tonight. Number one, we don't need to be afraid of this plague. Every morning, every evening, I read you Psalms 91. I've reminded you how many times in Luke where Jesus healed people of the plague. We don't fear this thing. We are people of a simple rest of faith. But I also want to remind you that in Deuteronomy 28, verse 21, the pestilence that sticks to you is part of the curse of the law. There is a pestilence that sticks to a person's life. You can't seem to get rid of this thing. This pestilence that will stick to a people is part of the curse of the law. And I want you to remember Paul says in Galatians 3:13 that Jesus Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law because cursed is he who hangs on a tree. The fact that Jesus died on that tree, the fact that he was nailed to that tree, he bore the curse of the law for us. So forgive me, I'm not afraid of a plague that sticks, a plague that just doesn't seem to want to go away, because I have been redeemed from the curse of the law. Now, let me talk to you very practically for a few minutes tonight. We all listened, I'm sure, with disappointment as our president spoke with us last night and let us know that this lockdown was going to continue until the end of the month. And we all went to bed last night going, oh, hey, Nakoi, 3 more weeks. But that's not something that we should fight. It's something that we should cooperate with. Now, how do we live in this meantime? Because, the idea of 3 more weeks, grabe, and we're in our 4th week now. It's difficult, I understand. It's difficult for the children. It's difficult for parents, especially with small kids in the house. It's difficult on the finances. Everything about it is difficult. But God never said that He'd help us as long as times were good, and in the difficult times He'd walk away from us. God always promised that He would never leave us, He would never fail us, He would never forsake us. Now, sometimes we have to determine to be like the men of Issachar. You hear me quote the passage a lot. I've quoted it ever since the first time I read it. 1 Chronicles 13, verse 32. The men of Issachar understood their times and therefore knew what Israel should do. We have to be like the men of Issachar. Every parent, every pastor, every leader, at whatever place of leadership you're in, you need to be like the men of Issachar. You need to understand these times and know what people should do. Know how to lead the people. Know how to lead your families. So we just need to understand these times, not fight with these times, not chafe against them, not war against these times, but understand these times. And when you understand them, then you know what to do. Now let me talk to you first of all about settling into the situation. The government is not going to let this lockdown lighten up until at least the end of April. In fact, to be honest, as you listen to the news carefully and you listen to people who know things, they're going to make it even stricter in areas. They're going to start using the military. They're talking about to quarantine off hotspot neighborhoods and nobody in or out. And, things are going to get a little tighter before they get a little looser. So I want you just to learn we can't fight against this situation, but in faith, we can settle into the situation. Now, you need to take a look, first of all, at your family schedule. You thought it was going to be over this weekend. Me too. We thought by next Monday we're going to be back to normal activities, or at least semi-normal, whatever that means, or new normal, or whatever that means. But we were a little disappointed when we heard. But now I say that to say this. Because we thought things were ending, things that need to change, we haven't been changing because it's just a few more days. Well, no, it's not a few more days. Now it's a few more weeks. So you need to sit down. What changes need to happen in the family schedule? What changes need to happen in the kids' schedule? What changes need to happen in your productivity schedule? What changes? Swapping around the chores in the family, swapping around who's doing what in the family. What adapting do you need to do to continue this for another 3 weeks? All right, we've gone through it for 3 weeks. We understand what it's like. Now, what do I need to change to adapt to go these next 3 weeks? Secondly, you need to really be careful with your finances and your food supply. Finances, because things are going to get more and more cash. ATMs are going to get more and more dried up. I told you going into this, you need to have a good stack of cash at home, smaller bills that are easy to spend, easy to send people out to buy small amounts of food with. But you need to check your finances and you need to check your food supply. Now, food supply is not just your bodega, but it's your source of food, your source of income. Now, let me define what I mean by that. You need to make sure that you have a good way of figuring out how to get food to the family. All right, this is the store I'm going to go to. I'm going to go here at this time every day. If I go later, it's going to be 4 hours. If I go earlier, it's going to be 2 hours. So I'll go earlier, so it's only 2 hours. But you get this thing on getting food figured out for the family. And then secondly, and you start getting some things delivered. I mean, a lot of people are getting jobs right now doing deliveries of groceries and things. So you start trying out this new delivery type system. You also need to be working on a source of income. Now, some of you have no problem with this. You're working from home. WFH is our new acronym, work from home. You're working from home, and all of that's fine, and you're still getting your income from your offices. But some of you, it's no work, no pay. Now, I've been talking to you all along about getting some ideas from people and letting God give you some ideas and developing new sources of income. So we're asking a lot of our members, and many of you are listening to me right now. You've hit on some new ideas and you're doing something that's bringing some income in that provides food on the table for the family. Some of you, one of our sisters is selling lumpia for 40 pesos a piece to all the people on their street. People want to eat some nice food and she makes really good fresh lumpia. Others, you're making just more basic foods, rice and chop suey, or rice and adobo, or rice and chicken, or whatever. And you're putting it in little plastic bags and selling it. Anything is fine. Others of you are baking bread. I understand that everybody seems to be baking right now, especially sourdough bread. That seems to be the popular thing now that people are doing. But whatever, you think of a new source of income. One of our families who had a tailoring shop, they're now making these, I don't know what you call them, spacesuits. They're PPEs, I think they're calling them. They're making these spacesuits for the doctors in the hospitals. Other people who have small sewing situations are making face masks for people. And there, some guys who are working with plastic things, they're making these visors. But people are all starting their little family businesses and doing things, feeling productive, earning some money, and moving forward. So work out your source of income, work out your source of food supply. But one of the big things you need to do is, how do I make sure that I'm feeling productive? When people don't feel productive, especially men, now ladies, hear me on this. When men feel useless, men get a little weird, okay? It's kind of a man thing. They have to feel like they're providing for their families and they're earning. So guys, especially, let's figure out a way to be a little productive. Maybe, you've got the money, you're all right financially, but you're just laying around the house all day watching Eat Bulaga. Well, You know, when you go out to buy the food for the family, pick up some paint, pick up some stuff to fix the roof with before next rainy season, work on those gutters, paint the inside of the house, fix the sink, fix the toilet. I mean, all these things that have been needing to be done in the house, guys, get busy and do them. Feel productive. Feel like you're doing something. Maybe you needed to do some work on your car. Pick up the parts while you're out and put those new brakes on the car. Do things to feel productive. Don't waste your life. The other thing I would ask that you do is start putting together a post-lockdown return to life plan. Now, I say that because when this thing lets loose, the pressure is going to be incredible from our companies, from our businesses, to try to get life moving again. And things are going to be forgotten, things that really matter. Things like your second son's birthday party that got lost in the middle of the lockdown. Things like your wife's anniversary dinner that got lost in the lockdown. Things that are very important to members of your family, but it just got lost in the lockdown. So you need to make a list of those things and a plan of how I'm going to do these things, post-lockdown plans and priorities, so that every member of the family, when this is over, doesn't feel like, well, I lost my birthday this year. Well, we lost our anniversary this year. Say, Pastor, you know, these are just little sacrifices. Yeah, you're right. But guys, that anniversary means something to your wife. Parents, that birthday means something to one of your kids. There's going to be a lot of things we have to do. Honestly, there's going to be a lot of funerals we have to attend. Not from the coronavirus necessarily, but there are many people just dying of normal things, and they have to be immediately cremated and put in serenity, and we've got all these memorial services that we'll be having to do when it's done. Weddings that have had to be postponed. I mean, baby dedications, all these family things. Please, when we get let out of the the houses, so to speak, and we're running with everything and happy to be free, let's make sure that we don't forget these things. All right, let's open up our hearts now and get into the School of the Cross. Tonight, we're going to talk about the themes of the Holy Week, and we're going to begin to deal with the plot of the religious leaders to kill Jesus, where it began and what it was all about.
For the rest of the day, I'm going to walk you through the events and the background of the events from the time of Jesus' trial until his death on the cross. A very specific period. There will be a few things I will bring out of Holy Week. And one of these years, I'm really thinking about just doing a revival night during Holy Week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, okay? And just teaching you what Jesus did on every day. We did it a little bit on the radio this year, and you can listen to the events, or you have been listening to the events of that first Holy Week. Oftentimes, our belief comes from superstitions. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7, for Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Everybody say, it's over. 1 Peter 3, verse 18, Christ died for sins once for all. How many times has Jesus died? Hebrews 9, verse 28. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sin of many people. But there are many today who believe that Jesus dies again every year. There are people all across our beloved nation that believe that Jesus dies today, and tomorrow they will tell their children, you cannot take a bath because Jesus is dead. You laugh because we've all heard that, Diba. You cannot climb a tree because Jesus is dead. You know, they believe that Jesus dies again every year, but that's superstition. Jesus died how many times? Once. Okay, now he ever liveth to make intercession for us. He's at the right hand of the Father. This only needed to happen one time. He was the perfect sacrifice. Sometimes our theology comes from Holy Week movies. Now, in the old days, I can still remember every Holy Week, all you saw were the old Roman soldiers and oh my goodness. Do you remember those days? The TV channels don't do it as much anymore, but I don't know. I don't have cable or anything anymore. But it used to be people had all these theologies, and they got it from watching Ben-Hur, and they got it from watching, the latest Jesus movie or whatever. But I'm sorry, the movies take liberties with the text, and they depart from what the Bible says, and they try to make it something that people would be interested in, and they create all kinds of false doctrines in people's lives. What we want to do is come back to the Scripture and understand from the Scripture what really happened. Now, there are going to be some themes that are woven through everything we're going to teach for the rest of this day. We can put them up. These are going to be the major themes. We're going to see all the way through everything we teach. Number one, the theme of the cross. The theme of the what? It's going to weave its way through everything we talk about the rest of the day. The next one, the false versus the true high priest. This is a big deal. We're going to start on it in just a few minutes, and it doesn't end until it ends, okay? At the very last few pages of our study, this theme goes all the way through. The false high priest, Annas and Caiaphas and their family, versus Jesus, the true high priest of the order of Melchizedek. The third theme that will weave its way all the way through the rest of this is the yeast of the human heart that we have begun to unfold with you in the Passover. The next theme that we'll see all the way through everything is salvation. Everybody say salvation. Everything is about salvation. The next theme that you're going to see is forgiveness that weaves its way through everything right up until the thief on the cross. Today you will be with me in paradise. And then leadership. We're going to see real leadership in Jesus versus poor leadership in the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, Pilate, Herod, and the others. And the last theme we're going to see all the way through is grace and mercy. Everybody say grace and mercy. I mean, right up to Jesus when Pilate is about to have him scourged. Is this your idea, or did somebody tell you? Because if it's your idea, we're talking about salvation here, Pilate. Thief on the cross, showing mercy and forgiveness on the cross. I mean, everything, every one of these themes is constantly woven like a beautiful tapestry through this entire story. Now, to understand the events of that first Good Friday, we have to understand what brought us to this point. What brings us to the cross? Now, there's a couple of things that bring us to the cross. One is the plot. Everybody say the plot. Everybody say the plot. Say it again. There has been a long-standing plot to kill Jesus. The plotters were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Herodians, the chief priests. The plot was between the pretenders and the reality of who Jesus was. All right, so there's this plot that brings us together. Now, let's begin to take apart this plot. The plot begins not in Jerusalem. The plot begins in Galilee, where the majority of his ministry took place. In fact, the plot actually begins in the ancient city of Capernaum, in the synagogue there. Matthew 12, beginning with verse 13. Then Jesus said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill him. Luke 6, beginning with verse 10. He looked around at them all and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so. And his hand was completely restored, but they were furious and began, not finished, they began to discuss with each other what they might do to Jesus. Now, if we can take you back with us to the ancient city of Capernaum, this is not the synagogue that Jesus preached in, but this is the ruins of the synagogue that Jesus preached in. First of all, notice all these black basalt stones. This is from the volcano. Now, this is a new synagogue that was built after the time of Jesus that are made out of white stones from Jerusalem because Capernaum became a very wealthy city. Do you see that black layer of stones that begins at the bottom of the white layer? There's a white layer, then there's a long white layer, and then the black layers begin. That is the foundation of the synagogue that Jesus preached in Capernaum. Now, roll the tape some more. The black basalt stones from the volcanoes. This whole area of Galilee is covered in volcanic stone. This is the white synagogue built on top of the old synagogue. There's the black basalt stones underneath the white stones that were the later synagogue built. Keep going. You really got to go with us to Israel and see all. This is a church built over the top of Peter's house and the city of Capernaum around it. Right under the center of that church is Peter's house. So it's a very short walk. Now, in that synagogue, not the white one, but the foundations there, that's where the actual plot to kill Jesus began. Now, the reason it began in Galilee is because Jesus spent very little time in Jerusalem until the end. The majority of Jesus' ministry for 3.5 years was in the area of Galilee. Now, sometimes people don't understand why that is. Well, you have to understand the importance of Capernaum. Capernaum is right at the end of a road called the Via Mare, the way of the sea. You can leave Capernaum, walk through the valley, come right over to the ocean, and then go straight down that road along the sea and get all the way to Alexandria, Egypt. It is a major trade route. It's a major what? So Capernaum was not just a sleepy fishing village. Bethsaida would have been a sleepy fishing village. That's where Peter, James, and John came from. But Capernaum would have been a very wealthy city. That's why it has all the white stones there that would have been brought all the way down from Jerusalem and the northern area, the southern area. Capernaum is full of, it was a manufacturing area. That's why you see so many of the big grinding mills and things there. It was a very, very wealthy area. So Jesus is there in the synagogue, and he sees a man with a withered hand, and he knows in his heart these people don't want him healed, so he heals him anyway. And the Pharisees, their response to a miracle was, we're going to kill this guy. They began to make plans to kill him. They couldn't compete with him. They couldn't heal anybody. Nobody wanted to listen to them. So the only way to deal with Jesus was to kill him. Now, we need to understand who these Pharisees were. There were 3 denominations, so to speak, of Jews in Jesus' day. There were the Pharisees, there were the Sadducees, and there were the Herodians. Everybody say Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herodians. Now, the Pharisees, these are the conservative fundamentalists, all right? These guys look like this. That would have been how a Pharisee dressed in Jesus' day. Now, if I dressed like that, I'd be sad too. The Pharisees were the fundamentalists. They were the conservative theologians. They did believe in miracles. They did believe in angels. In fact, Jesus used that theological controversy between them and the Sadducees for his benefit many times. They did believe in living a holy life, but they had their problems. Luke chapter 6, verse 13, or verse 14, Jesus said, the Pharisees who loved money. Well, back up to verse 13. Jesus said, no servant can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. Everybody say sneering. Now, the Sadducees were the rich, the elite. They had money. The Pharisees didn't have money, but the Pharisees loved money. The Pharisees also had a very elitist mentality. Matthew 23, 1-7. Then Jesus said to the crowds and his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. Now notice, he never said that about the Sadducees. He never said that about the Herodians. He just said that about the scribes and the Pharisees. The scribes were the guys who copied Torah scrolls like this. This is the last few chapters of the book of Deuteronomy, and this is the book of Exodus, where set my people free. The scribes would take and make these parchments and then copy everything in perfection. So the scribes were known for their knowledge of the Torah, the knowledge of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, what we call today the Pentateuch. The Pharisees were known for their conservative theology. So Jesus said, when it comes to the Pharisees and what they teach from the Bible, and when it comes to the scribes and what they teach from the law of Moses, you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for men to see. They make their phylacteries wide and their tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor in the banquets and the most important seats of the synagogues. They love to be greeted in the rabbi places and have men call them rabbi. Now, if we can come back to the picture, these are their tassels. They wore these tassels in response to the law of Moses. You'll find many Jews today do not wear their tassels out. They wear their tassels down the side of their pant legs. But these guys, they wanted everybody to see how holy they were, and they wore their tassels out. So the Pharisees are conservative in their theology. They believed the law of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, what we call the Pentateuch, what they call the Torah. They believed in angels, they believed in miracles. The Sadducees were sad, you see. That's my annual joke. The Sadducees, they are sad. I mean, the Sadducees, these are guys, this is not so much a theological party. Here's another Pharisee. You notice this is their phylacteries. And if you go with us to Israel and go down to the Western Wall, you will see guys wrapping these leather strips around their waist, around their wrist, and one around their head. These are their phylacteries. Now, the Pharisees, they're not trying to look holy with tassels and phylacteries and things. The Sadducees is, you did not become a Sadducee. You did not study in school and learn their theology. You had to be born a Sadducee. The Sadducees are basically the noble ruling class from the Hasmonean dynasty. Everybody say, the nobility. The blue bloods, okay? They would have been the old ruling elite before the Roman Empire conquered them 100 plus years before this, during the intertestamental period. Now, when the Romans conquered Israel, they did not want to have to run all this religious stuff. So what they did is they put some people in charge of the Jewish religion that would do what they were told. So what they did is they took the old noble class, the nobility, the blue bloods, and they gave them names like high priest and things that we'll talk about later. Now the Sadducees, of course, they didn't have a lot of religious desire. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection, Matthew 22, verse 23. The Sadducees were wealthy. I showed you earlier today where they lived in the Forbes Park, Desmonides Village section of Jerusalem. If I were to, when I take you back later, I'll show you the city again later on this afternoon. I'll show you how they did not even want to walk through the poorer areas of town to get to the temple. So they actually built their own bridge that went from the wealthy part of the city to the Temple Mount so that they did not have to bother with the little people, so to speak. These were people who had money. They lived in the wealthy section of the city. They did not believe in the resurrection. They did not believe in life after death. They believed that everything is for now. Everybody say, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you die. This would have been a very standard dress of the Sadducees. Now, notice the size of the rings depicting their great wealth. Notice how differently these guys are dressed from the common people down here. This will begin to show you the wealth, the gold, the wealth. You begin to see these were the ruling, everybody say, the ruling elite. Now, these next guys, these are the Herodians. Now, the third denomination, Pharisees are the fundamentalists. They believe in life after death, the resurrection of the dead, miracles, angels, etc. Sadducees don't hardly believe in anything. The Herodians basically believe in Rome. They are the collaborators. They are the what? Matthew 26, verse 16. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Now, Herodians basically were the collaborators. They did not have a lot of theology. They were more of a political party than a religious party. So they were quasi-spiritual, but mostly political, always telling the people that they needed to cooperate with Rome and participate with Rome. So these guys kind of look like this. Here's another picture of how some of them would dress. Again, you notice the medallions that set them aside. These are the Herodians. Everybody say the Herodians. Now, these guys all came to Jesus and they began to attack him. Matthew 26:16, they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teachers, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity, that you teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and you aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to what they say. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or to not? Now, notice, the Herodians are there that are pro-Rome, Roman collaborators. They report everything to the Roman government. The Pharisees are there. These are the ultra-nationalists, the ultra-Orthodox. So you've got Jesus stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he says pay taxes, the Pharisees are going to attack him publicly. Everybody say public. Remember, they are attempting to discredit him. We are now in Holy Week. We are in the temple courts. Matthew 22. This is his teaching on Wednesday. He's laying this out before the people. They are doing everything they can to discredit Jesus before the people. So they've got Jesus between a rock and a hard place. They've got the Herodians there. If he says, don't pay your taxes, they're going to attack him. He's got the Pharisees there. If he says pay taxes, they're going to attack him. Whatever he says, they're going to discredit him. So Jesus looks at them and says, I'll tell you what. And you can look at some of these coins. He said, whose image is the coin? Caesar's. Okay. If Caesar's picture's on it, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And he says, give to God what is God's. Because the coins that the Jews paid their tithe in and gave their offerings in, there are no figures of people. To this day, everybody say, no portraits. Every Jewish coin has like a palm tree or a flower or an olive tree or a menorah or something like that. They will not put, even to this day, a person's portrait on a coin or on a bill. They consider it idolatry. They consider it what? So Jesus just looked at him and said, let me see a coin. Whose picture is this? Caesar. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. How did they answer that? Look at the person next to say, Jesus is brilliant. Now, but notice the principle. These people attacked him based on their belief. Based on their what? Now, every one of us at some point in our life is going to have people try to trap us about what we believe. I call it a faith trap. They want to trap us. Do you believe in miracles? Do you believe in healing? Do you believe in tithing? Whatever. They've got some theological thing they want to trap you in. Always understand that when they attempt to trap you, they just revealed their theology. Everybody say, they just revealed their theology. When they walk up and say, do you believe in tithing? They just told you they don't. When they say, do you believe in miracles? They just revealed to you that they don't. Anytime people try to trap you, understand the attack is always based on what they believe, not based on what you believe. Now, all of that to bring you back to the synagogue. The Pharisees believed in miracles, but they were very strict literalists about Shabbat, about the Sabbath. So they don't care that Jesus did miracles. They care that he did a miracle on the Sabbath, because they said if it's done on the Sabbath, it cannot be of God. Everybody say, not of God, because God would not work on Shabbat. Now, before you think that that's a really strange thing, come with us to Israel and go through a Shabbat. And realize that if you get on the wrong elevator, you're going to open and close at every floor, all the way up and all the way down. Because to this day, a strict Orthodox Jew will not push the button on an elevator. They will not turn on a light switch in a room. Are you still here? If you are dying of a heart attack in an Orthodox neighborhood, they will not allow an ambulance to save you. In an Orthodox Jewish community, Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat. No work. Everybody say, no work. Now, of course, they have 5,000 ways to get around it. For instance, if somebody has to take a trip, what they would do is they would pack up some things and take it a day in advance, part of the way there, and then they would go to that part and say, okay, I now declare this is my house, I have my possessions here, so now I can travel another distance. They've always got ways around it. It's like, but you have to understand, these guys have been working on excuses for things for 5,000 years. Sister Bev and I were eating with some friends, and they ordered shrimp. And I said, but you don't eat shrimp. And they said, these are circumcised shrimp. What? How do you circumcise a shrimp? My favorite is pigs. They eat no pork dow because they eat low cows. You have tall cows and you have low cows. L-O-W, low, pandak. And it's against the law to raise pigs because a pig cannot touch the soil in Israel. No problem. You just build a wooden ramp above the ground and all the pigs are on the wooden ramp. Oh, excuse me, low cows. I mean, you gotta understand, these people got 1,000 excuses. But Shabbat is a big, big deal. Now, the Pharisees believed in miracles. They have no problem with the miracles. Their problem is he did it on Shabbat. Thus, it cannot be from God. That's why when Jesus said, listen, my Father is always working, and so am I. God doesn't take a vacation. I didn't hear you. Now, maybe they won't allow an ambulance to come and get me if I have a heart attack, but my Heavenly Father is still working so He can heal me. Thank you, Jesus. You have to understand these people. They're not being, I know they're being illogical, but this is thousands of years of Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat. I got on an elevator one time, and an Orthodox Jew was on the elevator, standing there, very polite. He'd gotten on the wrong elevator. He did not get on the Shabbat elevator. He asked me if I could push the button for him. I pretended like I didn't speak English. I was being very mischievous. Because I thought, grabe talaga, what is this guy? I mean, he won't push the button, he won't work, but it's okay for me to work? Now, sometimes I have a little fun with it. I'm a little mischievous. But you have to understand, in an Orthodox mind, Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat is Shabbat. Now, these guys believe, you've got to get this into your head. These guys believed in miracles. These weren't Sadducees trying to discredit the validity of a miracle. These were the Pharisees who just said, it cannot be of God because it was done on Shabbat. So, with that in mind, please understand, they felt very threatened because everything they've been telling people about the nature of God, Jesus just showed was wrong. Jesus just showed that the compassion of God also flows on Shabbat. Jesus showed that that God would work on Shabbat. They were confronted with a good God. They were what? They were what? Now, Jesus paid a price for this. And there's a principle you need to learn here. Sometimes you have to do right, even if you're going to suffer for it, even if you're going to pay the price for it. You just have to get a hold of that. Sometimes you do the right thing, even though you know you're going to get hit in the head for it. Everybody say, do the right thing and pay the price. I mean, sometimes you just have to do the right thing. Jesus knew these people were going to be mad. Jesus knew these people were going to fight him, but Jesus did it anyway. because it was the right thing to do. And this is where it all began. This is where Holy Week began. This is where it all began. In Capernaum, in the synagogue, the healing of a man with a shriveled arm. He violated Shabbat. Now they want to kill him. Everybody say, they want to kill him. Say it again. Now, I want you to understand that these people who wanted to kill him were the religious leaders. It was never the people. Yes, they stirred up a mob during that first Holy Week, but this was all driven by the leaders, not driven by the people. Now, I belabor this point a little bit, because in the 1920s through the 1950s, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in the world. And the anti-Semites basically called Jewish people the Christ killers. Everybody say, the Christ killers. Everybody say, the Christ killers. And we have people in the Philippines who call Jews the Christ killers. The Jews were not the Christ killers. The Jewish people didn't hate Jesus. The leaders hated Jesus. Everybody say, the leaders, not the people. Everybody say, the leaders, not the people. Matthew 26, beginning with verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, as you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Then the chief priests and elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. The people didn't hate Jesus. The leaders did. Everybody say, not the people, the leaders. Luke 19, verse 47. Every day he was teaching at the temple. But the chief priests, the teachers of the law, the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Not the people, the leaders. John 11, verse 47. Then the chief priests and Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take both our place and our nation. Now here's the problem. Everyone will believe in him. They knew they were losing the PR battle. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Herodians, they knew they're losing. The people love him. I mean, please, all the people of the city come to the temple courts to hear Jesus on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The city streets empty. Everybody comes to the temple to be with Jesus. They're not going to the temple to listen to Annas and Caiaphas. They're not listening to the Pharisees. They came to see Jesus. Look at the person that came to see Jesus. The people didn't hate Jesus. This plot to kill Jesus wasn't the people. Everybody said, not the people. Say it again, please. Now, most of this plotting took place in the palace of the high priest. Now, again, let me just come back and say one thing here. Please, when you hear this new anti-Semitism that's spreading across Europe today, it's already here a little bit. It'll get worse. Folks, please. The Jewish people are not the Christ killers. It was the leaders in that generation 2,000 years ago. Are we still here? I promise you, in this auditorium right now, there are people who are descendants of the headhunters of Luzon. Everybody say, my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a headhunter. Do you want to be held responsible for what your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather did? No. Prejudice is not logical, though. The Jews are not the Christ killers. In fact, to be blunt, when Jewish people get around sincere Pinoy Christians, they love us. They get around us and say, listen, we're being around you, we're very close to becoming a believer in Jesus because of the sincerity of your hearts. Please, don't ever let that anti-Semitism stuff get in your heart. And everybody said? And I've never had to teach that before during the School of the Cross, but folks, in Europe, it's getting ugly right now. In America, it's getting ugly right now. It doesn't need to be here in Jesus' name. I didn't hear you. Now, most of the plotting took place in the palace of the high priest. Now, probably the first thing that hit me the first time I went to Israel. Because the first time I went to Israel, I was only there for 3 days, and I basically stayed in Jerusalem. But one of the places I went was Caiaphas' house. And I will never forget walking into that place the first time. Let me show you some prison cells. This is underneath the high priest's house. These are prison cells. And then next to them is the dungeon, the extreme confinement area that they put Jesus. This is where they would have put Jesus on the last night. There you go. And that's some of us down there. Now, this is the thing that hit me the first time I went to Israel. Why would a religious leader have a prison under his house? That's when I really began to study about the high priest. I never paid much attention to the fact that Caiaphas was a high priest. Never paid much attention to how he became high priest. Never paid much attention to that. I knew it wasn't from the family of Aaron and the tribe of Levi, but I never paid a lot of attention until I started looking at this and realizing, why would a preacher have a dungeon and a torture chamber under his house? Not under his office, under his house. His children are raised upstairs. Why would a religious leader have such a thing? And this is when I began to really dig into this high priest guy. All of these meetings to kill Jesus, the illegal trials, all of this was done in his house. Now, I want you to notice the motivation of the plot. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. John 11, beginning with verse 47. What are we accomplishing? In other words, we're not able to stop Jesus. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. How many? They were afraid they were losing. Then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Both our place and our nation. Now, the real reason they wanted to kill Jesus was this. Everyone believes in him. The real reason they wanted to kill Jesus is this. All the people came to hear him during that first Holy Week. Everybody said, all the people. Now, you must remember that the position of high priest is appointed by the Roman government. Everybody say, appointed. It has nothing to do with spirituality. It has nothing to do with religious knowledge. It is purely a Roman government appointment to control the religious affairs of the Jewish people worldwide. They were afraid. If Jesus keeps going, the Romans are going to see that we can't control the people, but Jesus can. The Romans are going to see that Jesus is far more powerful and popular with the people than we are. We're going to lose our place. We're going to lose our what? They were afraid of Jesus pulling an Absalom on them and the Roman government appointing Jesus as high priest. Well, you know what? Jesus didn't need anybody to appoint him as high priest. He is the high priest. We'll get into that more in just a few minutes. So their first motivation to remove Jesus was, he's more popular than we are. The Romans may take away our position. And they did, by the way, later on. In about 63 A.D., the current high priest, who was also a descendant of Annas and a family member of Caiaphas, in fact, he's called Annas the Lesser, if my memory serves me correctly. The high priest in 63 A.D., the one who killed James, the pastor of the Church of Jerusalem, he assassinated James. The new Roman governor came in and was so angry that he had assassinated James, he removed that family and appointed a new family as high priest. This is purely appointment. Everybody say, appointed position. They were afraid of losing their place. Secondly, They were afraid the Romans would take away their nation. Okay, Jesus says he was born a king. Now, please, you have to understand. When Jesus was born, a few years after he was born, everybody say a few years. Here come the Magi, like the senators from the Medo-Persian Empire. They were the kingmakers, the ruling class. They came with their caravan outside of Jerusalem and said, "We have come to see the one born King of the Jews." And they brought this great gift to endow a new king. So for my goodness, for 30 years, 25 to 30 years, people have been talking about the fact that there is somebody who has been born King of the Jews. And several claim to be the one, but then here comes Jesus, and he is King of the Jews. Now, what these guys are afraid of is, one, Jesus will replace us, or number two, the Romans are going to come and smash us again because Jesus is king, and we're going to have a big war. So their fears are partly self-preservation and partly national preservation. Maybe there's a little bit of good in that, probably not much. Maybe there was a little bit of mean well, but probably not much. So they wanted to kill him. Now, there can't be too much good in there, because Matthew 26, verse 4 said they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way. Whenever people are trying to do things sly, they know it's not right. Matthew 15, verse 10, knowing that it was out of envy that the chief priests handed him over to them. Pilate knew these guys. Pilate knew that these guys were just concerned about themselves. So now we have the conflict set. The conflict is set not just between the Pharisees. These are the fundamentalists. They believe, they're nationalistic. They believe in angels and the resurrection and miracles and all this. The conflict is actually between Jesus, the true high priest from the order of Melchizedek, and this false high priest and his family. Now let me show you Jesus first as the high priest, and then we'll get into these false high priests. Hebrews chapter 5, beginning with verse 4. No one takes this honor upon himself. He must be called by God, just as Aaron was, okay? Paul's really clear. Nobody takes this position of priest. Called by God. For Christ did not take upon himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son, today I become your father." And it says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." In the order of, well, of who? Verse 9, or verse 8. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became a source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 6, beginning with verse 19. We have this hope as an anchor for our soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain, where Jesus, who went before us, has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7, beginning with verse 1. This Melchizedek was king of Salem. All right? What is Salem? I showed you this morning. Earlier. It's ancient Jerusalem. And priest of God Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him, and Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness. Then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Now, no father, no mother, no beginning, no end of days. He is eternal. He's what? Are there any angels that are eternal? No, angels are immortal, but not eternal. Immortal means they have a beginning, but they have no end. Look at the person next to you and say, "I am also immortal." Say it again. Every human being is a living spirit. You have a beginning, but you have no end. We're like angels. We have a beginning, but we have no end. We are created beings. We are mortal. The only thing that has no beginning and no end is God. Is who? Now, if you want to know who Melchizedek was, Melchizedek was Jesus before he was born in the womb of a virgin. He is what they call the pre-incarnate Christ. Everybody say, pre-incarnate Christ. We see Jesus manifested many times through the Old Testament. He's called the angel of the Lord. He's called the fourth man in the fiery furnace. But he's also Melchizedek, high priest. Salem was the center of monotheism, the worship of the one true God in the ancient world. He's king of Jerusalem. God has always put his name on Jerusalem from the very beginning. Even in the millennium, Jesus will rule the world from Jerusalem. Jesus is Melchizedek. Everybody say, Jesus is Melchizedek.
Thank you for joining us on today's School of the Cross with the Under-Shepherd of the Cathedral of Praise, Pastor David E. Sumrall. Join us every day this week from Monday to Friday at 7 p.m. as Pastor Sumrall walks us through the events that transpired during the first Holy Week. On Holy Weekend, catch Ignite the Moment the Musical on Saturday 7 p.m. and The Witness the Musical on Easter Sunday 7:30 a.m., 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. For more information, visit us on www.cathedralofpraise.com.ph.